So, welcome to Exposing Narcissism, a brand new series where we're going to dive into all things narcissism. I'm Anna, and I'm here with my co-host, Michael.
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. Yeah, we're really excited to start this series. We're going to explore the ins and outs of narcissistic personality traits and how they affect our lives.
So, I've got something super interesting for you today, Michael. I've been doing some reading about narcissism, and, it's actually way more complex than I thought.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this is actually one of my favorite topics to dive into because there's so much more to it than what most people think. Like when we talk about narcissism, we're really looking at these two distinct forms that manifest in totally different ways.
That's exactly what caught my attention. I mean, most people think of narcissists as these, super loud, attention-seeking people, but there's more to it, right?
There really is. And today we're going to break down these two types, overt and covert narcissism. Because, understanding the difference between them it's absolutely crucial for recognizing these patterns in real life.
Well, I can't wait to learn more about this, especially since, it seems like something that could affect anyone's relationships or workplace dynamics.
So let's dive right into overt narcissism first, because this is what most people typically think of when they hear the word narcissist. It's also called grandiose narcissism, and these are the people who just really need to be the center of attention all the time.
So these are like the more obvious ones to spot?
Exactly. And what makes them so recognizable is that they're usually incredibly charismatic, right? Like, they've got this exaggerated sense of self-importance that's just impossible to miss. They're the ones who, they'll walk into a room and immediately start dominating every single conversation.
So what are some specific behaviors we might notice?
Oh man, where do I even start? So, these individuals are constantly, and I mean constantly, looking for validation. They'll talk about their achievements nonstop, and they have this way of turning every conversation back to themselves. Like, if you're talking about running a marathon, they'll jump in and tell you about how they ran 3 marathons, barefoot, in the snow, uphill both ways.
That's actually a really clear example. Do they realize they're doing this?
Well, here's the fascinating thing, and they often don't. Because, in their minds, they genuinely believe they deserve special treatment, and they're really good at exploiting others to get what they want. They've got this natural charm that they use to their advantage, but it's all very calculated, even if they're not consciously aware of it.
So they actually believe their own hype?
Absolutely. And that's what makes them so convincing to others. They truly believe they're exceptional, and that confidence is actually really magnetic to people around them. At least until people start to see through the facade, you know what I mean?
So how does that compare to covert narcissism? Because that sounds like a completely different thing, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting because covert narcissism is it's like the stealth version, you know what I mean? These individuals are actually presenting themselves in a totally different way, and they're often really good at flying under the radar.
What exactly do you mean by flying under the radar?
So, unlike those overt narcissists we just talked about, these people often appear like really shy, humble, or insecure on the surface. And this is the fascinating part, they've got all those same narcissistic traits underneath. They're masters at masking it, right? And they often use things like passive-aggressive behavior and emotional manipulation to get what they want.
That sounds pretty intense. How do they actually do that?
Well, they're really clever about it. Like, they might present themselves as victims all the time, and they'll use guilt-tripping to control situations. You know what's really interesting? Instead of openly bragging like an overt narcissist would, they might make these really subtle digs at others, like rolling their eyes or making these little condescending comments.
Is there a specific example you could give?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So imagine someone at work gets a promotion, right? An overt narcissist might say something like, well, I should have gotten that promotion. But a covert narcissist, they might say something like, oh, I guess they're just giving promotions to anyone these days, and then give this little knowing smile. And they do this while maintaining this facade of being really humble and self-deprecating.
That's actually super sneaky.
Exactly. And what makes it even more complex is that these individuals often struggle with really intense feelings of inadequacy and depression. But instead of dealing with these feelings directly, they retreat into these elaborate fantasies about how brilliant and successful they really are. You know what I mean? It's like they're constantly living in this internal world where they're actually superior to everyone else.
I'm really curious about how these different types of narcissists actually impact their relationships. Like, how do people around them experience this?
Oh, wow. This is actually such a crucial point because, you see, both types can be incredibly damaging to relationships, right? The thing is, they both really struggle with something fundamental: empathy. Like they just can't genuinely connect with other people's emotions.
That must be really tough for the people close to them.
Absolutely. Covert narcissists are masters of emotional manipulation. They use subtle tactics that can completely mess with someone's head.
What kind of tactics are we talking about here?
So, they might make their partner feel guilty about normal things, saying stuff like, "If you really love me, you wouldn't hang out with your friends so much." They're good at making everything about their own pain and suffering.
Um, that sounds pretty exhausting to deal with.
Oh, it is. They create a web of emotional dependency, alternating between making their partners feel special and suddenly withdrawing attention. It's a constant emotional roller coaster.
So it's like they're playing this emotional game?
Exactly. And what makes it so insidious is that it's also subtle. Covert narcissists are like emotional ninjas, making their partners question their own reality and worth in ways that are hard to pinpoint or explain to others.
Wow. So it's pretty clear narcissism isn't just one simple thing, right?
Absolutely not. And what's really fascinating is how these two types, manifest so differently. You know what I mean? Overt narcissists are obvious about their need for attention, while covert ones are much harder to spot.
This has really opened my eyes to how complex this whole topic is.
Oh, totally, and we are just scratching the surface. And you know what's really important to remember? Understanding these differences isn't just about academic knowledge, right? It's about being able to protect yourself and recognize these patterns in real life.
Before we wrap up today's episode of Exposing Narcissism, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
So, the really crucial thing is that whether you're dealing with an overt or covert narcissist, they both fundamentally lack empathy and genuine emotional connection. The main difference is just how they show it. One's putting on this big show, while the other's playing this subtle psychological game, you know what I mean?
That's really well put. Thanks for breaking it all down for us today, Michael.
Thanks for having me. And remember, everyone, awareness is really your first line of defense when it comes to dealing with any type of narcissism.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Exposing Narcissism. Join us next time as we dive deeper into the complexities of narcissism and explore more strategies for navigating these challenging relationships.